But, if you're helping someone with breathwork who is going through a divorce or the loss of a loved one or contending with their own death, perhaps, that these are delicate, sensitive situations. The people who are trying to unravel the trauma that's bound them in the past. These are very, very profound moments. And in order to facilitate someone on this journey of self-inquiry and self-development, it's important that we have done it for ourselves.
Welcome to the Soulful Sound podcast, where you will find conscious, inspiring content to support your healing and transformation. Now, before we jump into today's episode, I want to extend a heartfelt invitation for you to be part of our community, where more insightful conversations await to guide you to heal, grow, and thrive. Simply click the subscribe button. It means the world to me, and your engagement is a big part of us reaching the hearts of other beautiful souls like you. Thank you so much for joining. Sending you love, healing, and sound wherever you are. Welcome back, everyone, to the latest episode on the Soulful Sound podcast. I am joined by the wonderful Anthony Abbagnano, who is a visionary thought leader, breath expert, and the founder of the internationally accredited breathwork school, Alchemy of Breath, a renowned academy that has become an online community of over 200,000 people dedicated to evolving collective consciousness. Yes to all that. Welcome in, Anthony.
I love that. Yes to all that. Thank you. I'm honored to be with you.
Thank you. Now, I kind of like to top and tail my episodes just with a bit of a personal story first, like what got you into the work you're doing today. These modalities are so precious, and I always feel there's somewhere along the line that we felt this is where I need to spend my time. So what's your early inspirations that drew you into the power of breath? And any slant you want to give me, I'm really happy to hear.
Thank you. I think when I was a kid, I don't know, maybe you experienced this, but when I was a young kid, there was an existential disappointment that people were kind of cold to each other and unkind to each other, and they would lie to each other, and that was okay. Like, oh, we can't come to dinner, the dog's not well, or whatever the story would be. And this was normal. And I just remembered feeling a really deep sense of disappointment. I didn't think that life was about that. It was my innocence was pitted against what I saw as I sensed as hostile and not friendly. And then when I was about 8 years old, just 8 years old, I was put into boarding school in England, and I really felt isolated and alone and unhappy. I used to cry myself to sleep, and like that sort of thing. And then one day, this young boy came up to me and he gave me a paper bag and he said, "Breathe into this." He said, "Breathe 20 breaths." And so I did, and then he came up behind me and he squeezed my chest quite firmly and then gently let me down to the ground. And it changed everything for me. I think that the closest way to describe it would be how people describe near-death experiences. I saw everything. There was no questioning anymore. I understood the immensity. It kind of felt that I knew already. It was such a clear reminder that I know this is familiar. And it was a complete spiritual awakening for me. And at the same time, it put into proportion this tiny amount of discomfort or suffering that I'd been experiencing. It was like, don't worry about that. That's not the real thing. This is the real thing, And so I was very heartened by that, very inspired by that. And then I began to play with the breath in all kinds of different ways as an adolescent. And then in my late adolescence, I became a breath coach when I coached my wife. I got married very young and we had a child immediately. And I coached her every night for the breath patterns we were going to use during the actual delivery. And I didn't realize that that's what I would do with my life, but that's what I was doing in that moment. And I've just always been in awe of it. So whenever I've had a chance to be facilitated by somebody, I've always grabbed at it just to find out more about what it is that happens.
That is so beautiful. There's so many nuggets in that. I often love stories where people can pinpoint that moment where something changes, whereas from one side to the other, one dimension to the other, timeline, whatever words we want to use, everything changes. And at such a young age as well, to then consciously continue working with breath is quite phenomenal. I think, especially because I mean, I don't know how old you are, but even considering my age and growing up, breath work wasn't a term that we used and knew of in any particular way, in a way that it's really quite vibrant and popular now. So that's really cool. I'd love to know more about the journey before you went into any formal training or any training that you started. Like, what was that inward looking piece with breath? What kind of things did you start to explore?
Well, I think the immensity of that first experience made a promise to me that I sought to understand more of. So it was really, notwithstanding the different incidents that happened in my life, I think that the breath has always been for me a guiding light, and I still believe that today. I'm really a breath evangelist now, and I understand it's like sound. It's as fundamental as sound in our lives, and I love to combine the two, of course, because we become more sensitive and alert when we're in the breath state to vibration and sound. So, but for me, the reminders I had to see my son born with a breath practice and the breath, the delivery, the birthing was with ease instead of drama and trauma. I just understood it to be so magnificent that whenever I had a chance, I would connect to it. And then at a young age, when I was 19 and a half, my wife left me and she joined a cult. And she took Damien, my son, with her. And then in order to get access to him, I went to visit them. I was living in the US at the time, and I went to visit them in Colorado. And I was told I wouldn't be able to see Damien, my son, unless I listened to their induction process. So, and those are the days that this is back in the 70s, early 70s, they used to call it brainwashing at the time. And so I went through their induction process um, and managed to escape afterwards. And they never let me see him. And then of course life continued, and I managed to gain custody of him later on. But I think that that experience really taught me a lot about leading a movement of breath work, because I could never do it if I was going to be uplifted or heralded or put on a pedestal as
Mm.
a cult leader, because I just don't like what that means. So it's been really useful for me. That it was only a 10 or 15-day experience, but it was really useful for me to understand the nuances of what leadership uh, really is in all of its facets. And I think it also alerted me to the importance of doing my inner work.
Mm.
Can we just pause for a second? Can you hear this puppy bark
No,
in the background? Good. Okay.
no. Okay.
Sorry for the edit there,
No,
but
no, no, it's okay. Don't worry about it at all. Yes. So you were saying those 15 days.
yeah, they changed I mean, they horrified me. I was traumatized myself for a good 15 or 20 years, but it taught me what I needed to know about a lot about the human condition and the human need to believe, and how I can meet that in a kind and graceful way. And it really informs the work that I do even today.
That's beautiful. I'd love to touch on that leadership piece because obviously, we get a lot of examples in life of things that we don't resonate with, as you can say that that's not the direction. So, how would you describe your best self in leadership now? I mean, this is a long time past, but I'd still love to know what that feels like and how it's expressed for you now as a leader in breathwork. Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think that we can tell when someone's using control rather than coming from an empowered place. We know that, if someone walks into your room or comes to dinner, or someone you meet in any social situation, I think we're kind of gauging each other, right? and the people that inspire you are the ones that are probably the better leaders than the ones that repel you or you get a sort of a negative energy from. And I think that's as good a guide as anything to really what leadership is. But my process and the really the hub of my work, the backbone of my work is the inner journey that we get to make as human beings in order to become leaders. And the people that I train, I make them suffer this inner inquiry in order to be sure that they can really offer quality to people that breathe with them. And, maybe some people aren't familiar with breath work and what it can do, but it definitely alters our awareness and alters our consciousness. And that doesn't always mean it's wonderful. Sometimes it can be really challenging. And most of the time it's just amazingly beautiful. And usually comes to resolution too. I've rarely seen it not bring us to resolution of one sort or another. But if you're helping someone with breath work who is going through a divorce or the loss of a loved one or contending with their own death, perhaps, that these are delicate, sensitive situations. The people who are trying to unravel the trauma that's bound them in the past. These are very, very profound moments. And in order to facilitate someone on this journey of self-inquiry and self-development, it's important that we have done it for ourselves. Otherwise, we'd be out of our depth and we'd be like, oh, what do I do with this kind of thing, which is no help at all. So I think that's the element of leadership that I've found most fascinating. And when I double click on that, it takes me to, I need to learn to lead myself and all the parts of who I am. And then I will naturally be available for other people in that way. And in some of the leadership classes I teach, the first thing I'll say is, who thinks they're a leader? And maybe 20% of the people will put up their hand. But then I tell the other 80%, you are just as much a leader as this 20%. You know that. Everything you do, someone is watching or learning from or learning what not to do from. So we may as well awaken to the fact that we're all in a leadership role all the time. It's just a question of how conscious we are about what we're doing.
Yes, and intentional, which I think is the piece of that in inner work, the inside out approach. I agree. I think that is the most important part of anything that we do in the world. And that reflection outward. So yes, there are a lot of people who might be new to breathwork listening, and there's so many ways in which it can be of help and support. What are, I know that a lot of your work, as I've been looking at your work, I've seen that you talk a lot about trauma. There are pieces of forgiveness in your work, and there's also a process, I think it's called the bridge, that looks phenomenal. And I'd love to know more about how you work with breath and the kind of people that you help.
Yeah, thanks. They've got three questions in one there.
I know.
I'll try not to wander and touch on each of them. First of all, the breath that is most well known right now without stopping. You're not pausing at the top of your inhalation or at the bottom of your exhalation. And that's really the most impactful breath that exists today. And it's quite transportative. In fact, people who take plant medicines enjoy it. People who have kind of a psychonautical approach and want to explore and discover will do it. And then it can also be used very effective therapeutically as well. So that's really, I suppose, the grail of breathwork practice right now. It's also the most misunderstood and the most abused and the most commodified. So you'll see there are a lot of courses you can take that take 2 days and you can become a breathwork practitioner, which I would really recommend against. But that's the way it is. It's like yoga then got a little bit sort of demystified and more normalized and more commodified. The same thing has happened in the breathwork world. But really, the journey, and we can talk about that a little bit later, but the journey into breath, I think, is is really important, because what we don't get about our breath is that it's not just the stuff of life. It's not just the first thing that ever happened to us on the planet or the last thing that we'll ever do. It's never ours. We always have to give it back. And the more you begin to inquire into it, the more fascinating it becomes, because it has so many secrets and so many mysteries that actually exist in just one breath. So I often say one breath is worthy of a lifetime of study. Imagine all the ones we've already forgotten about. And when we talk about trauma, what happened when we were traumatized is, of course, we lost our breath. We caught our breath. And that moment of freeze is enough to then embed the blockage and the trauma itself in the body. And if we don't resolve those things, those are the nature of things that become chronic in our later life, and sometimes the cause of even terminal illnesses are emotional situations that have not been resolved and have lodged in the body and have then become chronic into illnesses or pains or uneases, diseases. So the conscious act of breathing in itself is almost half the job. Just the fact that you're willing to focus and take a breath, it doesn't matter what the pattern might be, but just the fact that you're ready to do that shows that you are on the threshold of creating significant changes in your life. And I'll give you an example. If I if I trigger you, or if I insult you or wound you in some way, most people will have some kind of retort. They'll come back at me. And every one of us knows those kinds of conversations where you know you're going to say something that is not going to help, but you can't stop yourself doing it. You know, that kind of situation. So one of my students said to me, he said to me, emotional intelligence is the ability to take a breath when you don't want to. And so even in that moment, instead of escalating, if we can take the time to take a breath, we've opened the door to a completely alternative future. And then it depends on what we do in that breath. And it might just be as simple as, I think I need another one, or, maybe I'll take 10, or whatever it might be. But we're beginning to we're beginning to disrupt the normal pattern of events that we're used to living in. And so if we're not happy with those patterns that we live with, the employment of conscious breathing is the doorway that I use, and I find the quickest doorway to creating a shift. Now, the bridge aspect of it, the bridge is a system that I developed over about 9 years of practice and research. And it's almost ridiculously simple process that is about inner child retrieval. And it's trauma work. And the reason it works is because we don't really need to revisit the trauma. We actually are looking for the person that got wounded. Because in that moment of holding your breath or losing your breath, something happens. We begin to fragment. And because that memory is uncomfortable and we don't want to avoid it, we want to just dissociate from it. We want to get away from it as much as we can. So we don't want to go there. We don't go there until someone awakens it and they activate us, and then we get upset, and then we'll say childish things because we're out of control. So what the bridge is really all about is taking this adult self, the person you are now, and using the breath. We go on a journey back behind when the trauma occurred, and we reach that inner child, that part of you that got damaged, and we reconnect with her or him and provide a bridge for the little one to come across back into presence, into who we are today. So instead of lurking in the shadows, it's a part of who we are. Why would we deny it? And what I see happen with people is that they become more complete and more playful and more whole and more available and less likely to argue and to unconsciously escalate conversations into conflicts.
Oh, stunning. So much beautiful stuff in that. It reminds me, I do shamanic practices as well, very much soul retrieval. So it's that kind of child retrieval. You're bringing that child back into the now for wholeness, which is stunning. I love that. And I can really relate to the pauses. I mean, I talk about this from a sound perspective, as we were speaking about very briefly. It's the same, that sound and silence collaborate. You can't have one without the other. So even again, in conversation, that pause, which is breath and silence, allows for so much to happen before you sound again. It's just that one, I always say, it's just one sound away, right? Every new reality is just one breath away, one sound away. It's just stunning, how these moments can be so pivotal, even though it might seem simple.
Yes, because our tendency is to make it complicated, right? And
Yeah.
also our tendency as children is to look outside for sustenance, because naturally we're looking for a nipple or a bottle or a fix for what's wrong to get changed or cleaned or whatever it might be. And and we learn to think that way for the rest of our lives, that the solution that I'm really looking for is out there somewhere.
Yeah.
And the dark side of that coin is that I blame the outer world for the things that go wrong in my life. So I'm really losing agency at this point. I've lost agency. The bridge is really about regaining agency and becoming not just the creator of my own life, but also the rescuer of that wounded part of me. So I include it instead of blaming my abuser, which
Mm.
isn't actually going to help me. I am now taking the role of moving into the role of rescuer. So that means I feel stronger, I feel more empowered, I feel more enabled
Yeah.
and less diminished and less contained and less depressed.
Yes, that's beautiful. I'd love to touch a little bit on the science in
Mm.
terms of how breath affects the nervous system, how it can impact, whether it's through the vagus nerve or other things that you might feel called to share in the work that you're doing that you could bring to light. Because there's so much science now to back these modalities. I'd love you to touch on what you think is relevant right now.
Yeah, thank you. And there's a lot more being discovered every day. I think in the last 4 years, the amount of research projects that have been done is equivalent to the last 24 years or something like that. It's really now, thankfully, accelerating. But when
Mm.
we think back to the beginning of this whole thing, I mean, the beginning in the West, not in the indigenous cultures, because they've held secrets about the breath for, even millennia in some cultures. And these were kept secret for good reason, because the breath was considered so powerful that it would be dangerous to use it without the proper guidance.
Yes.
But when we look into our Western culture and the beginnings of how breath work really began to be consciously used, it was only in mid 20th century, 60s, 70s, that breath work became a thing. And but at the same time, that was when, at least in Britain, where I was in those days, that was when people started to use breath test. The police used to use a breath was a breathalyzer
Eliza. Mm.
in order to determine whether you were over the legal limit of alcohol to drive a vehicle. So already in those days, we were using the breath as a tool for diagnosis. When we look at what's happened since then, there are many illnesses that can be diagnosed and some pre-diagnosed by analyzing the breath. So about 70% of the toxins that come out of our body come out of our breath. And when you think about that, it's a bit like those in the old days when something was wrong with your car, you'd go to the mechanic and he'd lift the bonnet and he'd dig his head under there and fiddle and twiddle and find out what the problem was. Well, now they just put something on the exhaust pipe of the car and they take the exhaust and it's giving them readings and analysis of what's happening with all the qualities of air or lack of it that are coming out. And that's kind of where we're headed now with the breath. This is our exhaust system.
Mm.
So we now know that things like an imminent heart attack can be found before it actually happens. We know that um, things like kidney disease, bladder issues. They all skip my mind, of course, now because I'm on the spot, but there are about 6 or 7 very significant things that can be tested before they actually happen, and they can be revealed with the breath before anybody would check anything else. Another example is parasite, which we probably all know, called H. pylori, Helicobacter pylori, which in the old days people used to call it stomach ulcers, but now we know that actually it's a parasite that is contracted very easily by picking up someone else's glass or using someone else's fork or kissing or any kind of physical contact. And that parasite it doesn't kill us, but it's not a nice one to have. It doesn't do us any good. And that is also tested almost immediately with the breath. We can do it with blood, but the breath is much quicker. So we're beginning to understand the power of the breath, that it provides a form of diagnosis that's so fast and so non-invasive that it's going to get used more and more. One curious little story is in India since the 70s, they've been using breath to diagnose cancer, and they've been doing it with dogs. So the dogs would sniff the breath, all very low tech, but very functional. And then I don't know whether they'd pick up the pink ribbon or the blue ribbon or whatever system they would use, but they would give an alert that there's something going on that needs to be checked out more deeply.
Mm-hmm.
So what else about the breath? I think you mentioned the vagus nerve, and one of the treatments I would prescribe for anybody who has anxiety is to start working with your vagus nerve. I have something that I call the transformer breath, which is a breath pattern of inhaling for 4 seconds and slowing your exhale down to 8 seconds, and then extending that 8 to 9, and then 10, and then 11, until you can get up to 25 or 30. And what will happen when you breathe that way is you'll begin to calm down. You won't, you can't resist but calm down. The longer your exhale is, the more calm you become. If you want to really activate your vagus nerve, then you would make a humming sound at the same time as your exhale, and then you're helping to vibrate. You're getting the right vibration, and that vibration will not just help your vagus nerve, it will also help your sinus tract. If anybody suffers from sinusitis, that vibration, and our own vibration is the best one that we've got, right? It's our own prescribed medicine. Then you can begin to dislodge impacted sinus as well, which is a great tool. And then with things like what happened with COVID more recently, the whole concept of breathing through the nose has become much more significant. And we understand the importance of breathing through the nose and not through the mouth. In terms relevant to COVID, is that it stimulates the development of nitric oxide, and nitric oxide is all about upper respiratory tract resilience. It's also about wound healing. We're now understanding that if we combine nitrous and oxide, I can't remember. Anyway, when we create nitric oxide and put it on a wound, it will accelerate the healing of the wound. So just this breath practice itself is building a robustness and a resilience by breathing through our nose. And unfortunately, many of us do breathe through our mouth. So if you have a reputation for snoring, you might want to try mouth tape, which is a great way to just close off your mouth when you sleep and allow yourself to breathe through the nose.
Yes, building immunity. I mean, it's incredible what the breath can do. It's so beautiful.
Yeah. I was talking with a doctor today and about how all of the immune challenges that we're being faced with today are so complex and layered one upon the other that it's difficult to approach it symptomatically anymore. Thank goodness. Now we're beginning to look at what do we do to prevent it, and in the first place, and the breath is a primary tool for that.
Yeah, that is beautiful. And with this, I think you said transformer breath. With this breath, you breathe in through the nose, and the exhale, is it always through the mouth, your breath? I mean, I'm sure you have many techniques. Is that one through the mouth for those listening who want to give it a go?
It actually doesn't matter. You can
Okay.
exhale through either. I think it's a breath that is worth a lot of discovery, because the better you get at it, the more you begin to inquire, well, where am I blocking the breath? Where am I slowing down that
Mm.
exhale? Is it I'm slowing it down up this end, or is it down in my belly or my diaphragm? It's a very revealing breath, and I'm happy to try it. If you want to try a couple, we can try a couple together.
Sure, why not? Yes.
Okay, all right. So it's so simple. In for 4, out for 8, and then we'll go 8, 9, 10, just to give you an idea of how you can keep extending it. One thing I would say if you're trying it now is, don't judge yourself if you run out of breath too early or you've got too much left. That's exactly how it all begins. But the
Mhm.
idea is just with the choice and the commitment to keep going and to make it more easy as you go along. So
Yes.
what we'll do is we'll do 2 breaths with a count of 8 on the exhale, and then we'll go 2 for 9, and then we'll go 2 for 10. Okay?
Yes.
All right. So it's just, we're going to do, what does that make it? It makes it six
6
cycles.
rounds. Yep, 6 cycles. Okay, great.
Okay. So exhale to inhale, and now inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, and exhale. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale for 4, 2, 3, 4, and exhale for 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale for 4, 2, 3, 4, and exhale for 9, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Inhale for 4, 2, 3, 4, and exhale for 9, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Inhale for 4, 2, 3, 4. Exhale for 10, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Inhale for 4, 2, 3, 4. Exhale for 10, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Inhale and relax.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, really, how often in your day do you actually stop and do that? We just don't award ourselves the time to do it.
Yes, it's so important. It's funny because as a singer, a background as a singer and musician, I used to do a lot of vocal coaching, and this is kind of what we do: in for 4, out for 8, and then sometimes we'd have a hold and a release and different things in preparation for using the voice. And so I love the I don't know if it's a pattern interrupt, the 9 and 10, but I love that expansion there. I could feel in myself, and I love that you brought no judgment, because I know how the mind can get in the way sometimes of these. Of like, hang on, how should I be feeling it here? Oh wait, no, it doesn't matter. Oh, so for those listening who go along with this, please do try it for yourselves and take on Anthony's advice of letting go of that judgment if you can. Just play like a child, right?
Yeah,
Just have
exactly.
fun and see what wants to come up. But yes, I love this, and I think I mean, I feel so relaxed already. So yes, more of that, more of that. I know that you have a lot of integrative practices in your work as well. So of course, breath is the foundation, and you use this. But I've read in some of the work that you do that you bring some spiritual practices, Jungian hypnotherapy, psychology, or things like this. I'd love to know a little bit more about how you integrate that. As you touched on the bridge, I felt like there was other aspects that must be really beautiful, supporting it beautifully. So tell me more about the integration.
Yeah, thank you. To me, especially in this world of breathwork right now, where there are many offerings of peak experiences with breathwork, especially that conscious connected breath. Um, to me, the importance is, well, what's happening in between those sessions? It's not that, the session could be amazing and fantastical and illuminating and pivotal and enlightening even. And yet, if I go back to normal afterwards, then, what's the point? This isn't, it just becomes a recreational experience. So to me, integration of each breathwork, conscious connected breathwork session that we do is really, really important. It's not just important in order to make it work in between sessions, but it's also important for safety too, because after breathing in and out with a connected breath for 40 minutes or an hour, you're in what I call the breath state, and that's not a normal state. What's happening as you breathe is you're lowering the carbon dioxide level in your bloodstream, and you're raising the oxygen levels in your bloodstream. And if you don't do breath holds, which are another subject, but if you just keep that connected breath going, what you're actually doing with the frontal lobe is you're beginning to give less oxygen to the frontal lobe. So it would make sense to conclude that we think less, we think in a different way. And the more that we continue this connection of the breath, the more effect happens that our processing power goes back towards the amygdala, which is a whole different interpretation of what's going on. And so the question comes up, what is it that's happening in between these thoughts? If these thoughts are slowing down, these 60,000 thoughts a day that the Buddhists say we have, what happens if I'm running at like 10,000? What's going to happen between those thoughts? What kind of possibilities are there? And this type of inquiry leads us into really understanding what the power of the breath is all about. And it's essential afterwards, if we're going to maintain traction with this as a practice, to find ways to integrate it afterwards, not just to have the experience and go back to my normal life. Apart from the fact that if you go ride a bicycle after you've done a breath work, you're probably going to wobble, and you really don't want to be driving a car. You really don't want to be chopping vegetables with one of those wonderful Japanese knives that people have taken generations to make. It's dangerous. So you need to create space for the experience. You need to ideally be in nature or close to nature, or that could mean even having a plant next to you and focusing on the plant after the breath work, just so you allow your nervous system to come back to the normal level of nervousness that we have. But I think when we talk about the nervous system, this is really important. And I think, in my experience, is breathwork is one of the only ways that we can reverse manipulate some of the medical conditions and through the symptoms that we have. And let me explain what I mean. If you're in a panic, you're either not breathing at all or you're breathing a short, choppy breath. If you're meditating and you reflect on your breath, you're probably breathing a very slow breath, very slow, easy, almost imperceptible. I find when I'm meditating, if I go deep into meditation, it's like I don't even need to breathe anymore. So guess what? If you're feeling meditative and you need to be more upbeat, then you need to breathe a short breath. Or if you're feeling too panicky and jittery and you need to calm down, breathe a long, slow breath. And what I recommend to people as a way of gaining some kind of intimacy with their breath is to start cataloging the way you're breathing when you're doing different things. If you're frustrated at the traffic lights, how are you breathing? If you're waiting in the supermarket queue and the old man's picking out his change one by one and looking at them, and you're late for an appointment, how are you breathing? What breath could you breathe instead? If you're having an argument with your beloved, how are you breathing? If you're making love with your beloved or with yourself, how are you breathing? All of these things become really significant to catalog and record. And these actually become your toolkit, because then you know that for someone perhaps who has experienced premature ejaculation, using the power of your breath, you can guide yourself completely. For someone who finds it difficult to ejaculate, you can use your breath to guide it completely. The quality of our human orgasm changes completely when we become conscious of our breath. It becomes more of a whole body experience than a genitally driven experience. And our whole nature of lovemaking changes when we use our breath consciously. So, I mean, that's just lovemaking, which is a big thing, of course. But
Of course,
think
yes.
of all the other areas of our life too, where we could use it.
Yeah. I love the very practical stories. I was like everyone can relate to the moment that you're rushing and someone's holding up the queue or something, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. Now, I just want to go back a little bit in terms of the alchemy of breath. So your work, how much of it is, let's call it diagnostic versus healing? Because, you know, we spoke about the science and how much can be diagnosed through the breath, right? How much people can know and learn through the quality of breath. And that might be the scent, you know, lots of different things, I'm sure, in medicine. But in your work, I'm curious about the diagnostic versus healing, if there is anything that you want to share around those two for you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I do, you know, I'm not authorized to diagnose because I'm not a physician or a medical practitioner, but I think that and I don't really use the breath to find out what someone's physical issue is. What the way I work is to see the physical issue as representative of a deeper issue, which could be ranging from psychological, psycho-emotional, all the way to spiritual.
Mhm.
And so my work is really about, I don't know, you know, there's so many ways to say this, but there's a lot in our world that is a shit show right now. It's a total mess. And it seems like it's getting ever more so. There's more conflict, more disturbance, more argument, more disconnect, more, you know, for all the things, ways we try to connect that are modern, we're experiencing more and more isolation. Um, my job is to help people who want to change that for themselves. And so the alchemy of breath is really about the inner journey we make as human beings to understand ourselves, to retrieve those parts of ourselves that have been forgotten or left behind. You know, some of us are chasing success so much that we forget that we might have left something behind.
Mhm.
So it's about really slowing down in order to become more conscious instead of more barraged with outside stimuli. And of course, because we're born seeking outside support, we learn to look outside for our support as adults. But
Mm.
I really believe that there's a better way. And so my book, which is called, can I plug this just for a
Oh,
second?
yeah, please. And I will too, for sure.
And I'll get you a copy. There's one
Awesome.
for you right now. Outer Chaos, Inner Calm is about how do I transform the chaos that's outside me into the fuel with which I grow as a human being, and how can I navigate this journey? And the idea of this book is to take stock of who we are and what's influenced us as in our past, and to make some dance that might have happened to you as a child. What if you can rewrite the script of your life and become the author of your own life rather than letting someone else write your book for you?
Mm.
And so that's really where the central part of Alchemy of Breath is also, is helping people in their human journey in transitions, anywhere from birth to death. You know, we have parents giving birth with breathwork. We have people, our facilitators help people with the MAID program, the new euthanasia program in Canada, with their passing and everything in between, midlife
Mm.
crisis, death of a loved one, terminal illness diagnoses. All those difficult moments can really be transformed with the power of the breath. And all the joyful moments can be even more amazing with the power
Mhm.
of the breath. So
Yeah, that's beautiful. So, I mean, diagnostic might have been not the best word because I can hear exactly what you're saying from a medical perspective. So let me give you an example in my work. Voice is the main instrument that I use in sound healing. And for me, the voice is the doorway to the soul. And that's the instrument that I use. That is rides on top of the breath.
Yeah.
While I won't say to someone, I think this is what you have, or I'm diagnosing as such. Perhaps it's more about an awareness or a reading of someone's energy or someone's experience or something about them through the sonic sound print, right? Through their unique sound print. And I think from a breath perspective, you can, and I know that in as you were speaking about making love, when you can bring your breath into a rhythm with your partner, and lots of different techniques, and the things that they may use in tantra practices is about kind of bringing these things together. I think there's an element of you noticing in people, especially someone who is, I will say, advanced in breathwork, right? In the practices where you'll notice this person's breathing shallow in this particular way or this particular way, and that might, and it doesn't necessarily mean make an assumption, but perhaps there is an understanding that may come up from your experience. Now, I want to speak to it from that perspective.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think there are there are two major interpretations that I think hold true. The first one is relatively easy to understand, which is that people who breathe, if their chest expands more than their belly, they're more controlled in their life and they need control of life. And those who breathe in their belly and not in their chest are more emotionally present and more free, with the plus and the minus side of that, more susceptible as well, less protected, more vulnerable, which is a good thing in some ways, and other times can not be appropriate. We want to be protected and we want to be present and vulnerable as well. So that's one, interpretation, let's call it, of the way people breathe. And of course, all the conditions all the breath patterns or symptoms that I've described so far are indicative of an emotional condition, obviously. So if I'm not calm, I'm not in a calm place.
Yeah.
So that's fairly easy to interpret. And then the big one that's perhaps calls for some rumination or reflection is that when you facilitate someone breathing, you begin to notice that the way they breathe is the way they live. So some people will breathe sort of a hesitant kind of breath, and that's kind of the way they meet life. And then you meet other people who are sort of and they could tend to be more forceful and they want to push their way through life and everything in between. And I don't think I've ever seen it to be not the case. Except perhaps when I lived in Southeast Asia and I worked with a lot of Chinese people and Japanese people, and they have a different approach to breath, and they appear to be breathing less, but actually they're having a very profound experience. So that's the only exception I would say in my own experience of training and teaching people and breathing. We call it breathing people. That those are the kinds of things that we can interpret quite easily. And for example, the bridge that we spoke about earlier, when I take someone through the bridge, this is a very profound, it's a form of hypnosis. And just to qualify what hypnosis really means, it means extremely undisturbed focus is what it means. It doesn't really mean much other than that we go into an altered state of awareness that is not distracted or desensitized. It's just very focused. And the use of the breath there, if I'm working with someone who is perhaps over-identified with her inner child and is going into the trauma again, I would immediately bring her into a calm, soothing breath. And if he was a control freak and not emotionally present and a skeptic, I would probably get him to breathe a few conscious connected breaths so he can start to displace his normal mindset a little bit and allow space for emotions to come through.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And thank you. I kind of had some ideas on things that I don't know, but that there would be interpretations, and that's a great word, actually, for things, the commonalities or the common threads that you see across the breath or the way people, and I like the breath often tells you how you live. It's so true.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
so true.
I mean,
I
it's
resonate that with that.
the breath is the flow of life. Like sound, it's the flow of life. It's the
Yeah.
river of life. And if we abandon that river, it's a long
Mm.
walk. It's much better, much
Yeah.
better to get in the water and go with the flow.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes that means surrendering to the current, and that's some of the hardest moments, right? Rather than trying to fight the current. So I grew up in the Caribbean, and when we were learning to swim in the sea, and where this is beach, there are waves, and they would often say, "Don't fight the current. When the waves are coming, allow them to take you a little bit, and then
Yeah.
and so that's such a beautiful parallel to what you're saying now. We have to be able to allow that flow
Yeah.
within us.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful metaphor, especially
Mm.
like surfers and riptides. If you try fight a riptide, you're just going to exhaust yourself and
Yeah.
have less likelihood of survival. I think
Yes.
that's so true. And the you know the flow of our breath. This is why it's worthy of a lifetime of study to me. When you think about the unconditionality of that first breath that we took, just the open expansion of wonder and curiosity and availability and total presence.
Mm.
And then that last breath of our life where there's nothing to hold on to, all the relationships, all the credit card bills, all the assets, all the whatever it might have been, we get to let go of it and to contemplate that we're doing that with every breath. We're doing that with every in breath, every out breath. We're practicing, we're rehearsing. And how many of us will know that we've got 10 breaths left? What if someone's in their last breaths right now in this moment and
Mm.
very likely didn't think about the power of their breath until now, until there are only 3 or 4 left. So,
Mhm.
let us give this the attention that it's asking for and understand that secrets of millennia, and also we haven't even spoken about the spiritual aspects, but
I'm coming there next. Yes.
yeah, and my goodness, they're just enormous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, you read my mind. That's exactly where I was. I wanted to know more about that because the spiritual piece is in there as well. And I'd love to know how, again, like how you use it in your work in that particular space. And I can imagine that's very, very vast. So I'll trust where you lead me with it.
Okay, bless you. So first of all, every religious document refers to the breath as something supernatural. So if it's supernatural, and in the way it's referred to, for example, in the Quran, Muhammad was born because of the breath upon his mother's chest. It wouldn't surprise me if in the Catholic faith that the Immaculate Conception was the concept of breath impregnating the Madonna. So I think the breath is referred to as a supernatural element. The breath of spirit is referred to, I think, 43 times in the Bible, and is repeated in the Kabbalah and the Quran, not as many times, but as significantly. So if we're willing to accept that this word spirit is included in the word inspire, when we become inspired, we bring in spirit. If we're willing to accept that that's what we're doing, and let us just call spirit the God of your understanding, whether it's a Buddhist understanding of universal consciousness, or whether it's a particular faith that you might have or not have, belief system or non-belief system. If we're willing to consider it as a spiritual influence, what is it that happens when we're living in this mundane rush of life? What is likely to happen if we consciously import spirit into our rather dull existence? And I think something enormous happens. And I'd love to, if we can imagine a piece of string that is stretched out on a table, And we call one end of this string the body, this human form that's dense enough that you can touch it, even though most of it is space and air and water, but it's dense enough that you can touch it. And then the breath, which includes that is most that which is most subtle, you can't see it. You can only see what it does. If we put that at the other end of this continuum, at the other end of this piece of string, what happens when we breathe consciously and we bring this powerful force into our bodies consciously, it's as if we take those two ends and we join them together. And there's a circuitry that some people might say is born, but I actually believe is renewed, it's restored, because we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And some of us agree with that, and I'm sure some don't. But when we do breathe this way, there's a whole circuitry that opens up. And for most people, there's a lurch forwards. It's like something has been waiting to happen their whole lives, and all of a sudden it's like, whoosh, oh my God, I never thought that this could happen. And this is where we enter the world of we leave the mad matrix of humanity and we begin to enter what I call the miracle matrix. And this is a state of awareness in which things happen at quantum speed, there are quantum gains of awareness. There are spiritual perspectives that just don't have the space in our bandwidth to exist. But when we're in the breath state, we can have them. And I've seen some extraordinary things. I know you're going to say what, so I might as well say what.
Yeah, I'd love to know some. Yeah.
Physiologically, I've seen chronic pains disappear in 40 minutes. Things like neck pain for 10 years or locked shoulder for a decade. I've seen a woman who had an operation in England on her eye, and the eye was closed. She lost all ability to open her eye for a long time, and she got her vision back in one breath session. I've seen I've had many students who come to me as stage 4 cancer patients who've come out the other end in full remission and helping other cancer patients do the same thing. And I've seen, I think one of the sweetest, it's not the most miraculous, but maybe it is, which was very early on in my breathwork practice career, was a woman, a 75-year-old woman came up to me after a breathwork, and her husband was kind of standing alongside her, and she said, "My husband hasn't told me that he loves me in 25 years." And he just cried. He was just there crying and smiling. So I think we gain a perspective, or we regain a perspective, when we use conscious connected breath that we've accepted isn't there anymore. We've learned to understand that what is normal in our lives is the natural way to be. But when we use the breath consciously, we understand that it's not normal at all. It's very abnormal. The way we've accepted life is not what we need to be stuck with. We can uplift. We can uplift and we can create changes in minutes if we're willing to believe in a higher power. And I think that's the question. Well, that's to me is the statement. If you're not willing to believe in a higher power, how can that higher power help you? If you close the door to the possibility, then the possibility can't occur. So, and this is almost mathematical when people, I say to people during a breath session, notice what's different. What you already know has no value at all in this space. If you're in those like mind thoughts and thinking again and again, am I going to get it right? Have I got it wrong? And all of those, how does it feel? How does it feel to be worrying about whether you're getting it right? How does it feel to be frustrated that someone else in the room in a group is like really having an extraordinary enlightenment and you sit there counting how many breaths you've done and nothing's happened? How does it feel? And to learn to move towards the feeling and away from the thinking rational mind. And we find that the feeling and the sensations in the body where the feeling belongs become the portal to a completely different experience. It's like all of a sudden I'm seeing the other side of all these coins that I'm used to thinking are one-sided, and oh my gosh, there's another whole perspective that's available.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful, this embodiment of it. And also that I don't remember where I heard this, but that shift in perspective, often people say a miracle is just when we break down the time frame that we as human beings, that time construct between this reality and that.
Yeah.
And then it becomes like overnight, I'm cured, it's a miracle, or whatever it might be. The pain in my shoulder's gone after years. And it's like actually it's so possible when we can, as you say, get out of the mind and really come into that space where everything kind of breaks down and we come into remembrance. I think that's stunning.
Well, I think you also deal with that with sound, right?
Yes.
I know, I mean, I've studied sound medicine, and I do, I have a dear friend with whom we co-produce sound healing and breath work at the same time. And
Mhm.
so many times people will break through or break down or break open just with a vibration. And how lucky are we that we get? I don't
Yes. You know
I
what?
never thought that I'd be so blessed to help people in such a deep way.
I it's so humbling and it's such an honor to be able to do, you know, as we know, it starts with us and our own, as you started way back, kind of going full circle with the inside out approach, microcosm, macrocosm, however you want to look at it. But that inner journey within yourself, that healing within yourself, that sovereignty and ownership of yourself and the empowerment piece. And when we're in that space, then and I know a lot of your work, you talk about collective and collective consciousness. That in itself is a ripple effect
Yeah.
beyond the things that we then practically do in the work to help people and others and so on and so forth. So I think that that is just stunning and I celebrate you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I celebrate you too.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you so much.
I
Now
know. Yeah.
I can go on and on and on and I definitely would love to. I think we need to have a part two at some point because there's so
Okay.
much more to pull from this. And I want to I'm going to talk about your book as well because I mean I didn't know about your book and I want to know about your book. So that would be a really cool thing to jump into, perhaps in a part two.
Great. We'll get you, we'll definitely get you a copy. And also, if I had a final message, it would be I don't know if I've taken the question out of your mouth or not, but
You
my
have, but
final
it's
message
okay.
would,
But that's okay.
okay, all
Yes.
right, good. Thank you. What has your random act of kindness been today? That would be my question. And that goes to everybody who watches. And also, I we do something called Breathe the World every Sunday in the morning and in the evening. And so we breathe sort of the northern hemisphere in the morning, and we breathe the southern hemisphere to Australia in the evening. And we have several hundred people there. And at the end of the sessions that I give, it's online and it's free. At the end of the sessions that I give, I always ask people, please consider what your random act of kindness will be today, because I do believe that it's planting a seed. Everyone that we do is planting a seed. So that's my question: is would you commit to a random act of kindness every day? See what
Oh,
changes happen as a result.
stunning. That is beautiful. Well, I always ask my guests the final question, which is what is your soulful sound to the world? And that's a prayer or desire that you wish upon the world. So here we have it.
Oh,
A
bless.
random act of kindness.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, you're very cool, and it's been wonderful to spend time with you. I'm looking forward to more.
Yes, likewise. Thanks so much for your time and your presence, Anthony, so much. If you love this episode, hit that like and subscribe button and make sure to check out our other episodes. Thank you so much for tuning in, sending you love, healing, and sound wherever you are.